He's the superintendent of the South Carolina Public Charter School District. In this special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups, I speak exclusively with Elliot Smalley, one-on-one. And be sure to download the free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. And subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Elliot Smalley, it's so good to see you back here on Quintin's Close-Ups.
It's good to see you too, Quintin.
Yes, sir. Obviously, you are the superintendent for South Carolina Public Charter Schools.
That's right.
And obviously, you've been doing that for a while. What is it like to be you these days?
Keeping busy, staying focused on the priorities that we've set. And the one great thing about my work in our district is that the state legislature and state leadership made it really clear what the purpose of charter schools would be and our district would be. And it's all rooted in improving student learning and closing achievement gaps. And that's in the law. It's, it is our mission and our charge. And so that's what keeps me motivated and keeps me busy every day.
What are those priorities right now?
Yeah, I think, what we ask ourselves is what are the big levers that we can pull? What are the things we can do to achieve that mission? And so for us, it's both simple and difficult. It's simple in its clarity, which is we're going to be relentless about access and equity. We're going to look very closely at our schools and we're going to work to ensure that our schools look like our communities.
Okay.
And that every family has access to a quality school. Every family has that choice. So we want to remove barriers to those choices. We're going to be very clear about the kinds of schools that are ready to open with us and serve students in South Carolina. It's very difficult work to open a successful charter school. So on the front end, we want to make sure that when we're authorizing a charter school, we have a very rigorous process. We have a high bar that says we need extraordinary people who have great plans to do this work in areas of high need. And so that's really important to us. I think the other thing is accountability. We've really embraced accountability as a charter district. And we've said, look, when you open a charter, you make very clear the goals that you want to achieve. And we have goals as a state, and we have a very clear mission. And if a charter school fails to achieve those goals over multiple years, we feel like we should hold ourselves accountable and take steps, sometimes significant steps, to make changes in schools if they have not lived up to their potential.
What are those barriers you're trying to break right now?
I think, this is such difficult work. I think a huge barrier is just capacity and talent. The talent is out there. We work and live in such an extraordinary state. I'm from South Carolina. So there's so much potential out there, but I just think that, the know-how, getting a group together that really knows how to do this is difficult, and you need training. You need to really understand what it takes to open a charter. So we've worked to create our own incubator, which we just launched, the New Schools South Carolina Fellowship, where we've got 3 seats out there. We'll pay a stipend to a person or a group who wants to prepare to open a charter. So I think one barrier is just the knowledge and skill and organization it takes to open a school. I think we have difficult legacies. I think if you look at charter schools in our state, in the same way, if you looked at traditional schools, you see a history and you see patterns that are tough to reverse. And those patterns include patterns of segregation, patterns of inequality and outcomes. And those are often defined by race. And so I think it's really tough to turn a big ship around. And that's what we're working to do. And it's a huge barrier, just entrenched mindsets and entrenched practices over time. And so we're working to really reverse that.
You talked earlier about people wanting to know how to open a charter school. What does it take to open a charter school, say, in Sumter?
It's a good question, great and relevant question. We've talked, there's been a lot of discussion recently about charter schools in Sumter. I think the bottom line is this. Every child is born with great capacity and potential to learn and to succeed in this world. Right now, our system is not educating each child to that potential, particularly students in poverty and students of color in our state. And that's been the case for decades, even longer. And so what does it take to open a charter school and change that trajectory? That's the key question. You want to build a school where no matter what your innovation is, you're ensuring that every single day in every single classroom and every single learning opportunity and interaction, students are being presented with something that's challenging them and that's sparking their learning. And so it's on grade level or above and not below grade level. And that's a very difficult thing to do, inspiring teaching and learning. And so you got to know how to do that. You have to know what that looks like. You have to understand the talent that you need in your classrooms in order to produce that. You have to understand the content, the curriculum that you need to ensure is implemented correctly in every single classroom in order to do that. And you need to understand how you create a culture of high expectations where every adult relentlessly believes in every student's potential and in the school's responsibility to unlock that potential. And I think that's the main thing.
Yep.
And you need to be able to show this is how we're going to do this. It's how we're going to do it every day. It's how we're going to prepare our teachers to do this. It's how we're going to monitor our students' progress using this data system or this assessment. You need to understand how to do that. I think the extra thing I'd say is, every charter is autonomous and it stands alone.
Right.
So you don't have a district central office.
Right.
I used to work here in the district central office, taking care of all the operational stuff, the facilities, the budget. You have to do that yourself, and so that's an added complication. And so if you're going to open a charter, you really need a committee of leadership, and you need to have not just a plan for the teaching and learning. That's the heart and soul, but you have to also be able to show us how you're going to manage your budget, how you're going to have a facility plan, and all these other things, because you're a standalone school and institution. So you really have to have a smart business sense or have someone on your board or your team who's going to be really smart about how to use your budget, because you've got to manage all that stuff yourself.
What does the leadership look like right now in Sumter?
Good question. I'm not an expert on leadership in Sumter. I can't claim to be an expert in the leadership in Sumter. So I think, like anywhere, there are strong leaders in Sumter. There are strong leaders in every county in our state, whether it's a rural setting, an urban setting. There are people who have the great skill and capacity necessary to run a good school, and Sumter, I think, is the same.
When you look at that data for Sumter, is it viable to even have a charter school right now there?
I would ask the question, does every family need a great school? Does every family have a great school? Where's the gap? And I think in Sumter, I think there's viability for a great charter school. I think, simply because there's demand for better schools there, just like all across our state.
Sure.
And where there is demand, there can be a supply, and there can be a person or a group who's capable of opening a great school and serving kids. And I think that certainly exists. That need exists in Sumter, and that ability exists in Sumter for sure.
If someone were to come before you and your charter board, how would they go about it as far as a public hearing to try to see if they can open a charter school there?
Yeah, the good thing is we've got multiple steps for charter applicant groups when they come before us. There are kind of all sorts of opportunities in the application process to demonstrate that you're ready to do this. One is the application itself, and that application is very, very important. Your ability to take your time and go through what the state requires of charter applicants to be able to demonstrate strength and capacity and all these different elements of the plan, which I've touched on.
Right.
Not just your academic plan, but your budget, your operational plan. And so we're looking for evidence across all those different dimensions. We're looking for evidence that you've got a strong plan. So I think that's one huge opportunity that everyone has. Then you've got interviews. You've got a capacity interview, and those capacity interviews are not just with our team, but we record them and we share them with our board. So that's kind of another chance for you to show what you know. And then there are two additional steps that are public. And one is you get a chance to just come before our board and without any of our staff having gotten to our board and told the board what we think about your application, you get a chance to just come before the board in a public meeting and present to the board whatever your vision is, and have a Q&A with the board. So that's an opportunity for you. And then the final vote and discussion is held also in public. And so those are all the different chances that you have. And, in terms of public meetings, very clearly we have two public meetings on each charter.
Sure.
One of which, as I said, is not the meeting where the vote occurs, but it's a meeting where you come before the board and you bring your team, and it's open session.
You kept talking about the budget during this particular interview. Mm-hmm. What is the typical budget for a charter school right now, say in 2019?
It really depends on what your plan is and the students that you're going to serve and your particular model. I would tell you that charter schools are underfunded relative to other schools in our state. There's a huge gap. And so we basically start with a base student funding of about $6,000 per student. So, we've got about $6,000 per student that our schools get. And there are two different ways. If you come through Charleston County, you get Charleston counties per pupil, which is a lot higher than ours. So if you're authorized by a local board, that local board dedicates its per pupil funding to your school. So when you look at all the charters in Charleston County that have come through that board, they get Charleston County's, whatever that is right now. I don't know what it is, probably 8,600 or 8,700. If you come through the state charter district, you're totally state funded. So you're not getting any local revenue. Your local tax base does not flow into our funding at all. So you're just state funded. So it's a lot lower. It's about $6,000 per kid, and then it gets weighted. So if you're serving students in poverty, if you're students with disabilities, if you've got a lot of students in a specialized program, like a CATE program in high school, for example, you'll get weights added to that. And so when you look at the all-in funding, it gets up closer to about $8,000. Which is actually far short of the average in our state. And also, if you look in the last 5 years, funding locally in local districts has gone up each year. It's gone up by about 15%, the per pupil funding in schools in our state. Ours has remained flat. It has not changed. And so I made the case to the legislature this year that something has to give. Our schools have to pay the same, they pay their teachers retirement. They're trying to recruit great teachers too to do extraordinary work. So that's really difficult on the funding that they have. The other thing is we don't get capital funding. So when you look at, here, when I worked in the district and we passed the 1 cent sales tax to pay for a bunch of new buildings, we don't have that. And so our schools have to take that $6,000 per pupil. They have to use that for every cost that they have. So they got to use it to, get a mortgage, basically. They have to use it to rent a facility. If they want to have a couple buses, they have to use that money for that. Whereas all of your traditional district schools have a capital budget because they can raise that money locally. They can tax their local tax base. We can't do that. So it makes that per pupil even leaner because you got to use that $6,000 all inclusive. Whereas, if we look at, say, an average per pupil of $8,500 in a district, that's just on people and instruction and what's happening in the school. That school does not have to worry about paying, rent, for example, or paying for its buses because that's coming out of the district's capital fund. So there's a huge, huge funding gulf with charters.
How do you hope to close that gap?
I think it takes changes, legislative changes. I think that we need to advocate for that gap for the funding for charters to change and to increase. And we're just looking for, we're looking at equity and we're saying how do we just bring it closer to what a traditional school is getting. And I think we could also get creative about looking at poverty rates, and we could say maybe we start there and we weight transportation funding or facilities funding for charter schools that are serving in our highest need areas. And so maybe you could pilot it in that way and say, we desperately need to at least flow more dollars to the schools that are serving the highest need kids, predominantly students of color or poverty, like some other states have done. So I think that that's a place where we're going to take it. I would also say, I think it's been difficult in the past for the charter school community, so to speak, to push for more funding when they weren't getting better results. And I think that is starting to change. You can't, in my opinion, if you're going to come, you're going to ask the state legislature for more money, you should be able to, or anyone. Actually, if you're in a local district and you're going to ask your local tax base, or you're going to make the case, we need more money for our schools, I think we as educators and folks who are working in the education system, we need to be able to show, here's what we're going to do with the more money. This is the return on that investment that you're going to get in terms of student outcomes. And I think, sadly, for a long time, we couldn't do that in our district. We had the lowest district rating that you could get for 4 straight years. We were an at-risk rated district just before I started. Had a really low graduation rate. And so I found myself, when I took this position, feeling like I'm not in a place right now where I'm going to come to you and I'm going to ask you for more money. We need to be able to demonstrate that our charter schools are using their autonomy and kind of entrepreneurialism to generate better outcomes. If we can demonstrate that, then I think we're in a really strong position. We have credibility, and we can say to the legislature, our schools need more money. Our schools are producing great results. I'm really happy to say that we've had a 15-point increase in our grad rate over the last 3 years. We outperformed the state in end-of-course exams in all 4 subjects last year. We had increases in every subject while the state actually went down. We had increases in SC Ready last year. So we are just in a great position now. Our schools have higher growth rates than they had 3 years ago. And a really cool statistic that I think reflects the investment we made around access and equity and the extent to which we talk about race, and we talk about the fact that our schools need to be more representative. When I started, we were about 70% white. We were 70% white, 30% students of color, and had been that way consistently. Now, in just a few short years, we're 60-40. So we've significantly changed the demographics of our schools in just a few short years, and now our charter school community looks very much like the South Carolina community, which is what we want to see.
You talked earlier on poverty rates. What is the poverty rate in Sumter?
It's high. I don't know the exact figure. I haven't studied that. There are 85 districts across the state, and so one thing about this job is, I've got a sense for a lot of different areas and a general knowledge of them, but I don't know exact numbers. I wouldn't know the exact number of the poverty rate in Sumter. I believe it's high.
Okay.
Which speaks to their need for great schools, because we see consistently a connection between high poverty rates and low outcomes in our state. And that's not a reflection of families or students. It's a reflection of our schools and our systems, we, the educators, failure to do what we need to do for students who live in poverty. I think that can be changed.
You talked earlier about student outcomes across the state.
Yes.
What would be the average student outcome in Sumter?
Again, I'd have to go in and study Sumter's latest results for their district. I think that we see the same inequities, we see the same gaps between students according to race and poverty, where students who are white and affluent, middle class, have better outcomes than their peers who are students of color and who live in poverty, and we see that consistently in Sumter, as we do everywhere.
2020.
Yes.
Obviously, you all are bringing a charter school here. Why charter school? Why 2020?
But I think, it gets to the question of why do we need great schools right now? Why do we need better choices for families right now? And, as a Charleston native, as a Charleston resident who has 3 kids who are in public schools here, and also someone who just cares deeply about this community, having worked in the school district. So just, kind of taking off my hat of superintendent of a statewide charter district and more, just who I am as a Charlestonian, I see tragically the same kinds of outcomes now that I saw 10 years ago when I was working for the school district here. And so a lot of effort and a lot of well-meaning people, and I have tremendous hope in what the educators here in my home city are capable of.
Okay.
If given the right resources and the right plan and right vision. Right now, I think we can all agree that we have significant learning gaps between kids of color and their white peers here in Charleston, just like we do in Sumter, just like we do everywhere. And families desperately need better options. They desperately need better education options all around the city of Charleston, the county of Charleston. I would say downtown, North Charleston, so many different areas here. I don't think there's an area where we can say, we're truly crushing it. If we really look beyond the numbers and we look actually at poverty and race, there's really nowhere we can say we're crushing it.
Okay. Even
if we want to celebrate the fact that Academic Magnet is the top-rated high school in the country, Academic Magnet is a selective admissions school, and I applaud them. My nephew goes to that school, and so I'm really, really proud to see anything associated with Charleston, in the bright lights, winning awards. That's awesome. And I think that sort of shows us this tale of two cities that persists here, because if you go just a few blocks away, you see schools that have, would probably rank among the lowest performing schools in the country. And so we see that everywhere. And I think for that reason, we need great schools. Why 2020? I would say, why not right now, today? Right now, today, we need better schools. And so if we see a group that comes to us that's really done the work of engaging community, putting together a great plan, putting together great capacity to execute on that plan. For us, that translates into a high predictability that that's going to be a great school, a great diverse school serving multiple student needs.
Okay.
Why not? That's what we need right now in our community more than anything else.
What is the plan for Compass Collegiate Academy?
You should get them in here and talk to them about their plan. What I can tell you is they, we like I said, we have a really high bar. It's really rigorous what we look for in an application, and they put a really, really strong plan together. They're really focused on diversity. It's important. I think, when you look at the schools that I think have helped inspire their plan and the experience of the people who put that plan together, they're absolutely remarkable schools that are diverse and that are really high performing. And so there's this level of experience and expertise on the part of their founder and their founders around excellent schools that look like the communities in which they reside. And so I think that tells us something. And so I think their plan is to create a school like that here in Charleston, a school that's going to serve mixed income, mixed race, be truly diverse, just like our community. And they're going to do so in a way that's inspiring around what they expect and what they're going to present to kids every day in the classroom. And that's something that we desperately need. I don't know that a school really exists like that here. And so if there's a gap identified by families, I think, meeting that gap, meeting that need is really why we exist.
How many more gaps do you want to close when it comes to charter schools in South Carolina?
Sure. The way I look at it is we just need quality schools. I think at the risk of getting pushback from the charter community, for me, it's really about does every family have access to an incredible school? Hopefully access to a few incredible schools so that there's some choice in what those schools offer, but that there's this relentless, that the floor is really more like a ceiling in what we see and expect in every school, that every child graduates with the skills to have his or her own choices about where they want to go. Right now we're robbing students of that choice. When you're putting students through 12 years of education, 13 years of education, and they're getting a 13 on their ACT, what that tells us is that we have failed in that whole generation and all of those years to equip that child with skills to choose whether she wants to go to college or she wants to enter the workforce. Because we've got students who are frankly barely literate, who are getting diplomas, or worse, they're dropping out, they're not getting diplomas. So what do I want to see in charters? I want to see charters meeting that need. I want to see charters opening or growing in places where students really do not have good options. And then I'd love to see the different sectors learning from each other. The charter sector learning from traditional schools, from public-private partnership schools like Meeting Street. What can we all learn from each other so that we improve our practices? And I think that's the main thing. And frankly, look, if there's a place where a whole feeder pattern or a whole district is crushing it on results, then we don't need to be opening, in my opinion, there's not a strong need to open a charter in that area, because families have a lot of great options, and families have options that are really putting every student on track for college or career. Right now we don't have that. So we desperately need to do something different. We desperately need to deliver options to families who don't have them. So I want to see in the next few years more charters doing that. Again, like for me, it's not about we just need more charters. I think growth for growth's sake is not good for families, not good for taxpayers, not good for students. So we kind of put quality over scale, and we say, like, are you going to be high quality? Are you going to meet a need? And if you can answer those questions really well for us, then we're excited about you. We want to see you grow.
Let me take you back to May 1st. Obviously, they had the statewide teachers rally at the Capitol in Columbia. When you look at that rally to right now, what still plays in your mind about that event?
Yeah, I was just to be fully candid and human about this, I was kind of torn about it. And I think people were taking positions, very clear positions on it. And for me, I found myself a little bit torn. And I think as I got closer and as I got like messages from my own children's teachers, about going up to Columbia, I found myself really landing in a position of, support for teachers having a voice, support for teachers in our state who work under really tough conditions, support for teachers as a base who are grossly underpaid relative to other professions other professions where people don't work as hard, where the work is not as complex. And I think that's something we miss in teaching a lot. We tend to have a lot of sympathy in our hearts for teachers, and I've seen this throughout the years personally and professionally. And so we'll treat teachers kind of like we might think of a social worker or a counselor in that same way. If you go to a party and there's a teacher there, see people say like, oh, bless your heart, what you do is so important. And I think a lot of times we lose sight of the fact that teaching is incredibly complex, difficult intellectual work. I mean, the precision that is necessary, the focus that is necessary, it is so incredibly complicated to step into a classroom of 25 students who have all different levels of learning and knowledge that they're bringing into that day, and to have a standard that you want every one of those children or an objective in that day for every child to achieve. And you've got to create, a lesson that accomplishes that, and you have to differentiate, and you have to accelerate here and build up here and make sure you're presenting rigor the whole time. I mean, have you ever tried that? That is, go into a great teacher's classroom and it's, it's like watching Beethoven, or it is just incredible. And you have to be incredibly smart to do it. And so when you put all that together, what it takes, and then you think about what teachers are paid, and the fact that teachers really don't have a voice here like so many other people in power and positions of power have in terms of their lobbying efforts, I commend the teachers. And I found myself celebrating them that day and thinking, good for teachers for rallying together to improve conditions for teaching. You can't not do that and improve learning for students. And, my North Star is students and every child learning. And if we don't listen to teachers and we don't create better conditions for teachers, we are never going to achieve that ultimate goal.
Superintendent Elliot Smalley, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate this.
Thank you, Quintin. Always a pleasure.
Likewise. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.